All right, folks. So we're on the ground this afternoon in LaGuardia Airport. We're going to be doing a flight in the Cirrus SR20 today. One of the things I've done here recently is I joined a online flying group that uses this program called FSEconomy. What that is it allows you to simulate real-world flights on which you can actually get paid. Well, virtually paid anyway. So I found it pretty interesting to start doing that, start flying with that application. It gives you the ability to earn virtual currency. You earn enough virtual currency, you can buy your own airplane or multiple airplanes. You can actually create an FBO if you get enough money. So I don't know, it's kind of fun. It gives you a bit more of a purpose for flying than simply just going out and flying around for fun. Today, the flight I'm going to be working with is actually on behalf of the VR Aviation group. So I've been following and being a part of the VR Aviation group on Facebook. The owner of that page, Bambino, has created the FSEconomy VR Aviators group. And there's a bunch of us that have joined that as well. And when we fly, a lot of the money that's earned goes into that group. The pilots themselves also get a cut, but the group itself, the hope is that the combined efforts of the group can allow that account to grow pretty quickly, and then we can start to buy some of our own airplanes so we don't have to rent. In this particular case, because I'm new to FS Aviation, I'm renting Bambino's SR20, even though it says 4701 Mike because that's my local version. The official designation today is 328 Bravo Golf. That's what we'll try to remember to use in our radio calls. So with that said, the flight that we're going to be doing today is a flight that goes from LaGuardia up here down to Lebanon, Pennsylvania. It's actually going to take me right past my real life training ground, which is kind of right in this area. I fly out of Wings Field, Lima Oscar Mike right here, but a lot of my training flights and the stuff that I do is actually up in this area here. So we'll kind of right through that area to get to Lebanon. The FSEconomy passengers that I have today, I have 3 passengers that are going to Lebanon with me, and for that, the group will earn about $2,500. There'll be 3 passengers I'll bring back as well, and we'll earn that much money for the return flight. So that kind of explains what we're doing today. A couple of things that are a bit different is I've switched over to start using the native VR in X-Plane. As many people have pointed out, that is a pre-beta version of X-Plane, the VR for X-Plane itself. Prior, I've been using a program called Fly Inside, which gave us the ability to do VR. This native VR is still got a long ways to go. There's still a lot of bugs. There's still a lot of performance problems. I've been working, a lot of the people on the group's been working to try to figure out what the best settings are to get the native VR to work without it stuttering or juddering. But you can still see as I kind of look around here that occasionally you get that stutter or the judder going on, and it can be kind of annoying when you're actually trying to fly. But I have no doubt that Laminar will get that right before they actually release it as a full release. But for now, it's flyable enough in the pre-beta that I've decided to start using that. For those that are wondering, I am using the Oculus Tray tool to set my super sampling, and I've got that set right now to 1.4, because it seems like if I go any higher than that, I really start to get judder. It's a little bit lower than some of the other people in the group have had. I don't know if it's just because I'm using a lot of extra horsepower to do the recording with OBS Studio and the Oculus Screen Mirror, or maybe my laptop-based system just doesn't have enough horsepower to keep up. But anyway, I've got it set to 1.4, and I've got ASW set to auto. And I'm not doing any settings within the Steam VR app. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and jump in the airplane. One of the other things that's different with using the native VR versus Fly Inside VR is with Fly Inside, I used to be able to use the mouse to get up here and touch the buttons and turn the knobs that are on my panels up here that I don't have a physical representation of. Now I've got this handy dandy touch controller that is an Oculus product. That took me a little bit to get used to, but it was a fairly quick learning curve. You know, you can reach out and I guess touch stuff. There's not a lot it's happening right now because avionics are off. But it does allow you to, I'll demonstrate once we get things fired up, but allows us to actually control and touch all of this stuff. So let's go ahead and get fired up. So we've already done our pre-flight outside. We walked around the airplane. We're not tied down. We got our 3 passengers on board, although we can't really see them. Doors are locked. Everybody's got their seatbelt on. So let's go ahead and get our battery 2 on. Go ahead and set our mixture to rich. Fuel pump on. I'm going to move just forward a little bit in the seat and get adjusted. I like to adjust it so I can just barely see the nose over the dash, which is about the way a real Cirrus looks. So we got that adjusted. You can see the judder here. You see it jumping, the screen jumping. That's the judder. I'm hopeful that we can get down to the runway and get off and fly, because once we start flying, I think that'll calm down a little bit. So we've got battery 1 on, fuel pump on, mixture rich. Let's go ahead and clear prop. We've got our beacon on, or our strobes on. Clear prop. You notice I added a key to my dash here. I got tired of trying to reach for the virtual key. It's particularly useful when you're trying to do your mag check. Alright, go ahead and battery 1 on, alternate 1 or 2 on, avionics on. We'll go ahead and put our nav lights on because it's a little dark. I'll get our throttle set to about 1,000 RPM. When X-Plane went to 11.10, it broke something within the V-Flight Air Cirrus SR20, I found. I'd be curious if anybody else that's flying the SR20 has the same problem, but when you pull it back all the way to idle now, what happens is it goes down to about 200 RPMs. It's not really a good thing to have happen. And it also makes it a bit hard to, when you're landing, because normally you would pull it back to idle, but you can't really do that in this airplane because the engine will almost stop. But anyway, we got it about 1,000 RPM is about where you want to try to keep it on a real airplane. I've already got my frequency set in terms of ATIS. I'm not going to mess with, although I'll talk through it because it's good practice to do, I'm not going to mess with the actual frequencies, because I find that the ATC in X-Plane is horrible, and you end up listening to a lot of stuff you don't really care about. So let's go ahead and we'll listen to ATIS though to get that set.
Guardia Information Tango. 1900 Zulu weather. Wind calm. Visibility more than 10. Sky clear. Temperature 11. Dew point -12. Altimeter 2995. Arriving runway 04. Departing runway 31. Advise on initial contact, you have Tango.
Alright, so you can see here, I'll shut this off or it'll keep going. You can see how I can just reach out and I can grab the knobs and turn them, so it's pretty useful in the virtual cockpit. I might argue that I probably may not need the physical anymore, because it's so easy to use the touch controller, but I've got it, so I'm going to go ahead and continue to use it. Alright, so we got Tango. We're departing off of runway 31, which should be right over there. A nice short taxi. The wind's calm, the skies are clear. I like to fly with real-world weather and real-world time tracking, but for some reason turning those on seems to introduce a lot of judder in this native VR, so I've got them shut off. So we'll be flying on what's considered a perfect day for flying. Let's go ahead and get our flight plan in before we taxi. So one thing that is unique about the V-Flight Air that isn't representative of a real airplane is you actually have to tell it where you're at to begin with. You'll see up here that the coordinates are shown, but it's not tying us to an airport. So what we have to do is we have to hit the init button, and then we can bring up, which isn't on my physical keypad because it's not really a button on a Cirrus, bring up procedure and hit enter. That's all we have to do. Procedure again, and you'll see now that we're set. We're at LaGuardia. So now I can go ahead and put my flight plan in. We're just going to go direct to 9D4. All right. So we can go ahead and type that in. We got 9 Delta 4. All right. And we'll hit enter. We're going westbound, so we'll do 4,500, even plus 500. For those of you who don't know, the general rule is we're going eastbound, you're going to do odds, plus minus 500, or plus 500, so 3,500, 5,500, 7,500. If you're going west, you're going to do even altitudes, plus 500, so 25, 45, 65. You guys get the picture. Okay, so we've got our flight plan in. We got everything fired up. We got ATIS, we got Tango. So I would dial in ground, flip the ground, and give ground a call. So LaGuardia ground, Cirrus 3, what are we, 328 Bravo Golf. We're at the apron, ready to taxi to 3-1 with Tango. Then they would come back and tell us we're cleared to taxi. They would likely give us some taxi route to take, which in our case is really just going to be make a 180, take a left on the first taxiway to the runway. And you see we got a lot of jitter going on. Again, I don't know what. I guess I'm going to have to turn down things just a little bit more to see if we can reduce that. Again, it might just be because I've got so many things running on this computer in order to do the video that's not helping the situation. Not sure. Alright, so we'll get taxied up here to runway 31. We'll do a quick run-up, and then we'll go and make our flight to Lebanon and collect our virtual dollars. Let's go ahead and we'll use the checklist today just to make sure we got everything where we want it to be. So I can get out of the flight plan here, go down to my checklist. And let's see, we've already got the engine started, so we don't need that. Before taxi, okay, we did that. Flaps are up. We did the taxi list. Okay, so this is the full checklist that you would go through in a real airplane, unless you really got it committed to memory. So we got the doors latched. I don't know if the enter button works here. Yeah, something's. I don't know if I can. See if I can get that checklist to actually. Thought I figured out a way that it was actually checking the boxes, but yeah, whatever. We won't waste everybody's time with that. So we've got that caps handle. It's under that cover. For whatever reason, V-Flight decided to not make it a two-step process, but under the cover there is a handle. But if I pull the cover off, the parachute will deploy, which we don't really want. All right, so we got our caps handle, seatbelts. Everybody's got their seatbelts on. Fuel quantity confirm. When I start FSEconomy, it's actually going to reset my fuel, but just to 40 gallons, 20 each side, so I'm not too worried about that. Fuel selector, fullest tank. Okay, great, that's fine. Fuel pump on. Flaps, we're going to go to 50%. Bring those down. We verify those. And again, you can just turn the aileron all the way each direction, and you'll see that it lines up with 50-degree flaps. We've got that. Transponder, we're good with what we've got for now. Autopilot's disconnected. Navigation lights we've got set. Cabin heat, everybody's warm. Brakes, we're holding it. And then the rest of it we'll do just kind of as a flow. So we'll go ahead and pull up the engine page here. So we want to bring it up to 1700 RPMs. Or thereabouts, because it's hard to hit exact with the digital readout. Close enough. 1708. All right, we're gonna go left mag. No more than 150, so we're a little more than 100, so that's fine. We'll go back to both. 1706. Go back to the right. No more than 150. We're about 100 there, so that's fine. So we're within tolerances for each one and between each other. So back to both. We'll go ahead and check our alternator. Alternator are these two gauges here. We've got 47 and 25. If I flip on my landing light, my pitot heat, and wait for the judder to go away, you'll see that we jumped to 49 and 27, 50 and 27, so the alternators are taking the additional load. Go ahead and shut the pitot heat off. We don't need our landing light right now either. We'll shut that off. So then just a quick check across the board. You know, we've got good fuel flow, we got good oil temperature, good oil pressure, charging system looks fine, the batteries look fine, fuel quantity looks fine, all that'll reset in a second. We're not really using anti-ice and oxygen, but they look good. So we can go ahead and bring the throttle back to idle again, back to 1,000. Or thereabouts. And then we'll go back to the checklist, just make sure we got everything. Where are you, checklist? There we go. Alright, so we did all of this. We've got the power level back to idle. Vacuum we don't have on this airplane. Flight controls, flight instrument set, flight controls, free and correct. One goes up, one goes down. Everything around looks good. Trim for takeoff. About right, and autopilot is off. Alright, so that's fine there. We'll get out of that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and get my autopilot set here before we go to. We're going to be, well, first we want to use our GPS, so I can reach up here, hopefully. No, can't quite get to it, so I got to move up just a tad bit. We'll change the CDI to GPS, which is the magenta line. I like to go ahead and get the wind on here. So we can add the wind. Then I put a bearing on here as well for the GPS, so I have a backup bearing indicator as well as distance. So we can go ahead and back out of that. And we can go ahead and put our flight plan up here if we want to view that, although it's a pretty simple flight plan. Alright, let me reposition my seat a little bit. Okay, so we've got that set. I'm going to go ahead and set my autopilot. I'm going to get that set here to 4,500. Got to learn to go slow on this. Seems like the faster I move this, the slower the altitude actually goes up. So you actually move it slower. God forbid a guy that wants to go up to 14,000 feet. They'll be sitting here turning all day long. Have jets lining up behind you. Alright, so we're going to want to climb up to 4,500. In this airplane, you always climb, in this particular autopilot, you can set an indicated airspeed. So we can set indicated airspeed. So we want to climb at 105 knots. So I'm going to go ahead and dial that in. Alright, and we're going to fly heading mode when we first go, and that heading will be roughly what the 3-1, that's the runway we're taking off on. Get the heading bug set. Alright, so really all I need to do then is once I take off and I get the airplane cleaned up and stabilized, I can just hit autopilot and it'll start to fly what we need it to fly. Oh, we got somebody behind us ready to go. So in real life, I think LaGuardia would be a little pissed at us spending all this time on the runway, but they'll have to get over it. Alright, so the final thing we want to do is just a quick briefing. So we're at LaGuardia Airport. We're departing runway 31 in our little Cirrus. Rotation speed is 66 knots, and once we rotate, we're going to want to shoot for about 85 knots on climb out. Once we get to 500 feet above ground, which in this case will be about 500 feet on the altimeter, we can go ahead and bring the flaps up and then accelerate to our 105 knots, and that's about when I'll put the autopilot on. Because we have a parachute on the airplane, we want to brief that quickly. So if we lose our engine at any time below 500 feet, we're going to have to land straight ahead in the Hudson, or whatever, I guess that would maybe be the East River. Anything above 500 feet, we're going to immediately pull the parachute. And anything, and we'll keep that mindset up until pattern altitude. Anything at about 1,000 feet or above, we could make a 180 and get back to the runway. There is a reason behind the 500 feet on the parachute. It's because of the way the parachute deploys, and I've got another video on my YouTube site that explains that. But you don't want to pull it below 500 feet or you'll be in some hurt. Alright, so I would have then switched frequencies to Tower and LaGuardia Tower. I would have done this before I started taxiing, but here I'm going already. LaGuardia Tower, Cirrus 328 Bravo Golf, ready to depart 3-1. And they would say cleared to take off on 3-1. And so taxi out here. That jitter's kind of bad. Alright, we'll bring up full power, full mixture, make sure we're generating 100% or close to 100% power, and we got good power, 95%. We're looking for our airspeed, it's active, looking for 66 knots, there we are. Go ahead and rotate. Off the ground we go. Oh, forgot one thing. I'm going to pause this for a second. That one thing is I'm flying for FSEconomy, so I actually need to probably turn that on or I won't get paid. All right, let's see here. We're logging in. We're logged in, I believe. Let's start our flight. All right, we've got our 3 passengers on board. Whew, that was close. I would hate to got to Lebanon and find out that I left my passengers in LaGuardia. All right, so we're going ahead. We're climbing out. We're shooting for 85 knots. A little faster because I got distracted. Flying runway heading. Looking for 500 feet. I'm flying it by hand at the moment. Alright, we're at 500. We've got 85 knots, so we go ahead and bring the flaps up. Kind of arrest that nose down attitude with some back pressure. Back trim. I'll go ahead and turn the autopilot on now. So now the autopilot, I should be able to let this go. The autopilot will now fly us at 105 knots up to 4,500, and it'll continue to hit the heading bug. So probably about this time, then LaGuardia Tower would contact us and tell us to contact departure on a certain frequency, so we would dial that in, flip it over, contact departure, and then they would start to vector us through the busy New York airspace. Luckily today, we're all by ourselves, so we're going to kind of ignore that. But then go ahead and flip over to nav mode. Now that'll start to track our GPS. So the jitter is still pretty bad, as you guys can see. It may be just because we're flying over New York. That's I guess that's Manhattan there off to the nose, and so it's trying to generate a lot of auto-gen scenery, so that might be part of it. I guess we'll put up with it until we get past New York and see if it settles down a little bit. Might be helpful too once we get up to a little bit higher altitude, because that would then the auto-gen is not near as heavy on the CPU. Okay, so we're in the climb portion of our flight. I'm going to go ahead and check out the climb checklist here. We'll go over to the checklist page. Actually, just take a quick look out the window. That's pretty cool. I don't remember what island that is, but there's a kind of an arrow-shaped island that is in the East River, kind of flying over Manhattan. You know, I think in real life this would never happen. If I zoom in here, you know, we're flying through some of the most busy airspace in the country here. I think they would probably vector us up and around, but again, the joy of flying virtually, because you can fly right over that airspace. Okay, so we're in the climb checklist. So where's my little controller? Here we go. So we did the takeoff. We're good there. Next, climb. So we got our climb power set, which is full power in this airplane. The flaps are up. The mixture, we're good for now. The engine instruments we're monitoring, and the fuel pump we go ahead and shut off. All right, and then the next checklist we'll end up doing is when we kind of level out at 4,500. So we still get quite a bit of judder going on. Again, I hope the whole flight's not like this, but hopefully it'll calm down a little bit once we get past Manhattan. But you can look down there and you can see representation of Manhattan. One of the other cool things with the native VR is that you can actually jump to other views, so I can go outside and do a ride along here. See the airplane, see it against the Manhattan skyline. Be kind of a cool picture to get, I guess, if I could figure out how to do that. See me in there. No passengers though. But you can also, you know, you can go other views. This is chase, so it's a little bit farther back. What else do we got? Circle. I don't know, it's pretty cool. You can also do a replay mode or save or pause it from here. I don't really want to do replay because I'm in the middle of a flight, but get back in the cockpit. A little less noisy in here. Try to recenter myself in the cockpit. One of the other things that happened with the native VR is now you've got this X-pad in here, so really that doesn't have a lot of purpose, but I'm guessing that eventually Laminar will put some other functionality in here. One is reset the pilot view, which I just did with another method. The other is there's a map here that you can actually pull up. It's a pretty rudimentary map, but you can also use it to track your position if you don't want to use the map on the MFD or your iPad. Okay, so we've arrived at 4,500 feet, so let's go ahead and we'll do our cruise checklist since we're right there. Fuel pump off. We've got our fuel pump off, cruise power, so we're going to pull it back to, I'm going to pull it back to about 80 right now, which is not a whole lot, less than what it was. And then we're going to go ahead and lean the mixture. So to do that, oops, my mouse back over here. To lean it, we just go back to the engine page, and what we do is we're going to watch the exhaust gas temperature, which is these gauges here. What that's doing is it's measuring the temperature of the exhaust as it comes out of the manifold. And as you can see, is when I pull the mixture back, we'll start to see the temperatures come up. So the scale is pretty, you know, it's weighted between 1,000 and 1,600. That's why you didn't see it until we get to this point. But what we want to do is we want to continue to lean it until we get to the peak. So what will happen is the temperatures will continue to rise, continue to rise, continue to rise. And then at some point you're going to get to a point where they start to decline. Right there, they're declining, and we want to bring it back to about 50 below that peak, and that gives us the best power. So about there is about right. And now we dropped our power. We went from 80 to 72% because we're basically cutting our fuel flow. So I'm just going to give it a little bit more throttle here. Now we're at full throttle. We're not going to get to 75%, so we'll maybe feed a little bit mixture in there till we have it at 75%. So what that's called, that's leaning from peak. You're basically bringing your temperatures up to the peak temperature, and then you're going to lean it back 50 below peak, and that gives you your best power. In the real airplane, you have a thing called lean assist, where you just hit the button for lean assist, and then you pull it back until it tells you it's found at the peak, and then it'll tell you where to stop. So it basically just prompts you. In this particular aircraft, in the virtual aircraft, and in airplanes don't have that, then you have to do the kind of the manual version. So anyway, but we're at 75% power. We're leaned out. We're yielding about 10 gallons per hour, which is what FSEconomy says this airplane should use. So we're good there, and we're boogieing along. So I'm going to go back to the map page here. I guess I'll go back to the checklist and finish that. So we lean the mixture. We're watching the parameters and the fuel flow and balance. We'll just continue to monitor that. So Go back to the engine page here. We left with about 20 gallons in each tank, so let's see where we're at now. According to this, we've got about a little less than 20 in the left tank and about 20 on the right tank. So that's fine. We'll go ahead and we can go maybe 5 gallons each side. So once we get down to 15, we'll go ahead and switch to the other tank. The other thing you can do is you can also do every half hour. It just depends on how you want to manage your fuel. All right, I'm going to go to our map page here, zoom out a little bit. We'll do 20 miles. We'll declutter this thing, get rid of all of the the intersections, get rid of airports that, I don't know what these airports, a couple of versions of airports. See, there's a lot of stuff between here and Lebanon. All right, so the judder hasn't slowed down much, so for the next flight I'm going to back that super sampling down a bit more. I can also back off my graphic settings a little bit to see if that helps. When other guys on the aviation group, the VR aviation group fly, they can get pretty seamless, non-juddery performance in the airplane. So I think I must just be pushing the limits a little bit. On the stream, you'll also see that I've got my task manager in here. My hope was to be able to watch that and see if I see any anomalies going on. But now that I'm looking at it, you know, the GPU is at 30%, CPU is at 70%, so something's eating that CPU up. If I scroll up, it looks like the other thing that's taking it is the OBS. So again, part of that judder may just be related to the fact that I'm doing capture with OBS. If I wasn't doing that, maybe it would be a bit smoother. But certainly we're using 40 or so percent for X-plane on the CPU and 30% or so on the GPU. We've crossed over into Jersey now. Headed down into Pennsylvania. We'll just kind of watch our progress on the map. So this is the portion of the flight that you just kind of want to monitor things, right? So we've got the airplane flying on automation. We've got the autopilot flying. It's following our GPS course. It's holding our altitude. So there's not much that we have to do there. I'm gonna find my controller here and turn the yaw damper on. Not sure that we really need it. Everything's good, so really all that's left for us to do is just monitor things, make sure that the airplane is doing what we expect it to do, make sure the autopilot doesn't start to do something wacky. So we're going to be looking at our altitude, make sure we continue to hold altitude, follow our course, our airspeed. We're doing about 161 true because we don't really have any wind. But yeah, we just want to make sure that everything looks good here, track our progress over here. We're going to watch the engine parameters, make sure that all the engine parameters stay within the green and the acceptable range. Again, once we get the fuel balance gets down to about 15 gallons on the left, we'll go ahead and switch it over to the right. This probably use about 10 gallons, so should be about halfway through our flight. We'll switch over. We can watch our map over here too if we want. One thing that I wish was better, and again, I don't know if it's just specific to this V-Flight Air. They do their own custom G1000 panel. I've not flown any other G1000 panels that either use the X-plane or the some of the other developers' panels, but it's almost impossible to know where you're at because the maps don't really show you names of things, right? So even if I zoom in on the moving display, you see airport names, but unless you're familiar with what those airports are, you really don't know where you're at. On my moving map, I can zoom in and I can say, oh, I'm in Sky Manor, or I'm in Alexandria. We're going to be going past Allentown. and the other thing in this G1000 is there is no map itself, right? So all you see is airports. So hopefully they'll improve that in the future so you can actually get a moving map. I was reading today on the Aviator forums that there's a new version of the Steam VR API that allows you to bring external windows in. So that might be an option where I could bring my little nav graph in, or even, you know, ForeFlight or FlyQ, which is what I use on my iPad. You could bring either one of those, a mirror of those, in to the cockpit and replace that, or put it, you know, similar to this. Wow, with some really bad judder. So anyway, that might give us some ability to get better moving map capability into this airplane. But you know, I've got enough tools. I can look down at my iPad to see exactly where I'm at once it starts tracking my location. You know, I can always slip the headgear up and look at little nav map. That'll show us where we're at as well. In any case, we're about a third of the way into the flight. If I look up here at the dash, about 28 minutes we're going to be there, 76 miles out. You know, throughout this time, that's a weird thing. I don't know if anybody else has seen this happen, either in the Cirrus or any other aircraft, but for some reason I've got this little quirky bug that all of a sudden the flaps will go down to 50%. I don't know why. I just started noticing it after I went to native VR, so I don't know if there's something in native VR. It seems like I read that there was somebody in a 737 that was having that problem. They thought it was maybe the Zibo mod, but I'd be curious to hear if anybody else is seeing that happen. But it just randomly, the flaps go down to 50%, and when you do that at 150 knots, it pitches the nose way up, and my guess is if I had failures enabled, it would rip the flaps off the airplane, so that's not a good thing. Again, we would normally be handed off to a couple of different approach departure frequencies if we were doing flight following. So, you know, while we're not doing it here, one of the things that I would be doing is changing frequency, calling different approach centers. We probably would be, based on where we're at here, we probably would be talking to Allentown. Probably Allentown here. They'd be handing us off to Allentown here shortly because we're going to skirt through Allentown's airspace. Hopeful that somebody will come up with a good ATC program. There are a number of them out there, and I've seen mixed reviews for different ones. I have yet to try VATSIM, which is a real-world interaction with, a lot of them are actually air traffic controllers that get on their simulator and do it. But I just haven't, when I've logged on, I've not seen a lot of those controllers in the Philadelphia or Philadelphia area. I suppose I could go to another area like New York, and maybe there would be more possibility of having somebody there. We're coming up on Sky Manor. We're going to pass right over Sky Manor, off a little bit over off to our right. It's a little airport that I've gone to occasionally with my real-world flying friends. It's a nice little airport. So the sun's going down. It's tracking. I set the time pretty close to what it was when we left, so that's going down. By the time I get there, get turned around, the sun should be going down, and it should be starting to get back for the flight, dark for the flight back. So it'll be a little different. All right, take a look at our fuel. We're still a little bit above 15, so it'll be a little bit before we can switch over, but we'll just do a quick scan. Make sure we've got, airspeed's good, altitude still's good. Still following our course, engine's still, everything's in the green, still on course. Fuel looks good, so. One of the other things I've noticed with native VR, though, is that the scenery seems to be it's almost like I'm looking through some kind of opaque filter. So nothing is real clear. And tonight, I don't know if it's just because I'm going into the sun and that's affecting it, or again, if there's just something with native VR, but it seems like every flight that I've taken in using the native VR, it's not very clear, so it's hard to even see the the environment outside. I do fly with, I've loaded up zoom level 16 ortho tiles in pretty much most of the areas that I fly, and then I get into zoom level 18 around the airport, so it's actually pretty detailed. So if we could have a bit clearer picture, you can see looks like we're, you know, flying over actual real land. So the map shows we got somebody directly ahead of us here. ADS-B on these airplanes has made traffic awareness much better. In the old days, right? The old days, you see and avoid, right? So you'd be looking outside, but going into the sun like this, it'd be almost impossible to see an airplane coming at you. So you've got ADS-B in these airplanes. I can zoom out now on my MFD. You can see I've got somebody coming at us at, I think that means 4,400 feet, so they're probably 100 feet below us. This should be interesting. See if we can see this guy buzz directly below us on my iPad, which doesn't appear to be working at this point. It would also show us the traffic. I don't know, let's watch. Let's see if we can see anything out there. And we'll just hope that he isn't at our altitude and just hit us. Might be that blinking thing right in front of us. That may be maybe somebody. I'll go ahead and turn my landing light on, just to give some additional visibility for that guy. That's probably him, that little blinking thing up there. In real flying, it would be prudent probably for me to take a turn to the right and just make sure that I avoid him. You know, we're pretty close. I don't know if that's him, though. The map says we've gone past each other now, so that might be an airport down there. All right, well, we never saw him. We didn't hit him, so that's good. Okay, so let's see, where are we at? We're 18 minutes out, we're 50 miles out. So let's see if this guy has any kind of an ATIS at all. I'm going to guess probably not because it's such a small airport, but you never know. And he doesn't have an ATIS. He does have a common traffic of 1228, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in. It's a good habit to do. So what I can do is get down here to COM, and in my backup frequency, 122.8. It's actually a fairly common frequency for airports. And I'm going to go ahead and, oops. Let's find an airport around here that has ATIS. So we can look on our iPad. We can also go over here. There's a nearest page, and we can start to scroll through these to see if there's any airport that has ATIS that's nearby. I just want to make sure that I've got my altimeter set. So we've got UKT, which is, I've flown into that airport. I can't remember the name of it. Well, let's go ahead and use that. Let's check that. Now that doesn't have an ATIS either. Or what is this? Oh, it does. 11947. All right, so we can go ahead and put that in here. 11947. And let's swap over to it. There we go. And let's see if we hear anything.
Quakertown Airport weather.
Quakertown.
Wind calm. Visibility more than 10. Sky clear. Temperature 10. Dew point -12. Altimeter 2995.
All right. Yeah, we got the same altimeter, which I guess makes sense because I'm not using real world weather, so it's not going to have changed from when I left. But it's always a good idea to check, you know, at or near your destination to make sure that the altimeter is set. Try to get the winds. We don't have winds on this. You know, we don't have winds in the simulator today, so we've got 2 runways to choose from. We've got 19 and 1. Given our course, it looks like we could use either, so we'll probably use runway 19. We'll come in and we'll do a left base for 19. It's also a good time here to start getting familiar with the airport that you're going to. So I can look here on there, find out my elevation. We're 523 feet. The pattern altitude is 1600, so we're going to want to descend down to 1600. If we were doing an approach, I'm not even sure. Let's see if this thing has an approach. Yeah, it's got an RNAV. Unfortunately, RNAVs don't really work in X-plane at the moment, so we're just going to do a visual landing, visual approach here for this one. Maybe when we go back to LaGuardia, I'll do an ILS. It's always good to practice those. But just make sure we're familiar with the airport. Oops. And I'm using my iPad to do that. Sorry, you can't really see that. I'm sure that information is in nav map too. Little nav map. Let's see here. What happens if I pull it out? Okay, yeah, it gives us the elevation. The runways are hard and lighted. That's good. We like hard runways. 3,700 feet, so we shouldn't have any problem getting in there. This airplane, anything over 2,000 feet is more than fine. We got our CTF already in there, so we're good there. So I just want to make sure you're familiar. You know, it would have been prudent to make sure before your flight that you actually did that as well. You check the weather, check the runway, make sure that it's someplace you can actually get into. The last thing you want to do is arrive at an airport and 1, find out it's covered with clouds or fog, or 2, find out it's got a really short runway and you'd never be able to land there. So it's just one of the basics of flying, is always make sure that in fact it's mandatory that you make sure part of your flight planning is to ensure that the airport you're departing from you can actually get out of, and that the airport you're going to, you understand the runway lengths, elevations, and whatnot. We're about 35 miles out. We gotta lose just about 3,000 feet. 20 miles out, I'll just go ahead and start a shallow descent. It doesn't hurt to get there at pattern altitude a little bit soon. And if it looks like we're going to get there before I get to pattern altitude, well, then I'll just increase my descent rate. But it's always good to plan ahead a little bit. Last thing you want to do is dive bomb the airport, makes your passengers upset, their ears pop, scares them. They don't like that, right? So it's always good to plan a little bit ahead, start a shallow descent. There is a descent checklist that we'll use. It looks like we've got some terrain showing up here on the MFD. You can see the hills ahead of us. This part of Pennsylvania does get pretty hilly. I've come and flown up in this area a couple of times, and it's actually pretty cool because it almost looks like it's got like cornrows, where I don't know if it's the glaciers that came through, but the glaciers came through and carved these paths in here. So you'll have a valley, and then you'll have a ridge of hills, and then you'll have another valley. It's pretty cool. There's an airport I'd like to come out here that's Schuylkill County. The airport actually sits on kind of a top of a hill, so as you come in, it's really deceiving. It looks like you're really high because you're coming in over a big valley. Come down and you land, and when you go to take off, as soon as you come off the runway, the ground just drops out below you, so it's like you're climbing pretty quick. Oh, and the judder continues. Sorry about that, folks. There goes those flaps again. I don't know what's causing that. Alright, so we're 30 miles out. I think one of the things that I've neglected to do here as we've been talking is switch tanks. So we're at about 15 gallons. So to switch tanks in this airplane, you always want to turn the fuel pump on just to make sure you've got good fuel pressure in case there's air in the lines or something for tank 2. You can go ahead and flip over to the right tank. Leave the fuel pump on for a few seconds, again, just to make sure you don't have any kind of blip in the engine. We're going to go ahead and pull our fuel tank off. Make sure our gauges look fine. This little map here has some bugs too. You have to exit to get out of it in order to get a little farther away. And then of course you get that big judder thing that happens, or whatever that's called, blackout. Well, we're coming up on 20 miles. You can tell it by our range circle here. We're about to get to that airport. Up here, the magenta line says 26 miles. I mentioned earlier that my super sampling is set to 1.4, 1.4. So what super sampling does is it increases the number of pixels in each frame, right? So what it does is it's supposed to make things clearer. And so as I drop the super sampling down, things get a little bit fuzzier. As I increase it, it should get a lot clearer, sharper. So because I've got it set at 1.4, it's a little hard to read unless I move in. So again, I apologize for moving around. Apologize for the judder that continues. But we're 25 miles out. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to start us down. So I'm going to set our altitude. I want to go down to pattern altitude. So I'm going to go ahead and dial in 1,600 feet. You notice that the autopilot doesn't change. It's not following my setting here, and that's because the autopilot flies the flight director. It does not fly what you're actually dialing in. And the flight director was set for 4,500 feet when we enabled it. So what I'm going to go ahead here, I can go ahead and come down to 1,600 pattern altitude. And on descent, we want to use vertical speed, not indicated airspeed. So what we do is we can hit the vertical speed button, and we'll dial in. We can dial in 500 feet per minute down. That's a nice, gentle descent. I'm going to pull the power back just a little bit. We'll go ahead and pull it back to 70% or so. Doesn't take much when we're lean like this. I'm going to add just a little bit of mixture. We just want to make sure our airspeed doesn't creep up into the dangerous zone. But on descent, you want to use vertical speed, 500 feet per minute. Again, that's a nice, easy descent. People's ears don't pop. People don't get scared. That should get us down to about 1,600, 500 feet per minute. You know, it's going to take us, what is that, 3 minutes? No, 6 minutes to lose that 3,000 feet. And we've got about 6 minutes to our destination, so this should be a pretty good descent rate. While we're doing that, let's go ahead and do our descent checklist, because we're in our descent. Next, it's our descent. We want to set our altimeter. We did that. We checked one of the nearest airports, and we got the same altimeter setting, so we're good there. The cabin heat, well, we don't need cabin heat, all that sort of stuff. Landing light, it's already on. We turned it on for that traffic. Fuel system, check. Right, we're on the fullest tank. Our fuel pump is off right now. Mixture's good. And check our brakes. We just want to make sure we have brake pressure so that when we land, we actually have brakes. And then the next checklist we'll do is our before landing. We'll do that once we get close, a little closer to the airport. That's just kind of our final check. Flip our map, start to dial in a little closer here. So you can see even a 500 foot per minute descent, and pulling the power back to 70%, we're doing almost 180 knots over the ground. So we're making good time. Making good time. Once we get to Lebanon, we're gonna use runway 19 because we're kind of set up to enter a left downwind. We'll fly our normal pattern. We'll fly a downwind leg. We'll fly a base leg. We'll fly a final leg. And for those of you, I've done some videos around pattern work that kind of goes through the details of what speeds and how you fly a pattern. But we're going to be looking for about 100 knots on 105, 110 knots on downwind. Once we get to the end of the runway, we're going to slow it down to 100 knots. Our base will fly at 90 knots. Our final will fly at 85, slowing to 80, slowing to 75 as we cross the threshold and touch down. And since when we get about 10 miles out, this is an uncontrolled airport. Again, we would have been talking to approach. We could tell approach we'd like to change frequencies to advisory frequency. And we could also, they'll probably ask us to report airport in sight. I don't have the airport in sight yet, but we'll go ahead and change over to 122.8. We'll tell them, they'll let us resume our own navigation. All right, we're on that. And now they're about, we'll wait till about 10 miles out. We'll make that call. But the judder would be fine if I just didn't even move my head. Then that kind of defeats the purpose of VR. So I think I can see the beacon straight ahead there, blinking. At this time of day, or this time of evening, you really got to make sure you're putting a lot of faith in your GPS or whatever moving map you're using so you actually go to the airport. There's a lot of little airports around here, and you don't want to be that guy that lands at the wrong airport. Now granted, in a small airplane like this, it's probably not near as embarrassing as the guys that have done it in big jetliners and landed at the wrong airport. But it's hard to see. It's hard to see the airports around there with this, I don't know, haze or fog that I'm looking through the ground. It's really hard to know where you're at. Your map isn't a whole lot of help. And you'll see that there are actually two airports close to our destination, or at least it's showing on that map. My iPad's not showing that, so I'm not sure why. It looks like there's a little private airport just prior. We're going to fly right over it, just prior to Lebanon. But I want to make sure we don't land at that one. All right, so things are looking good. We're holding about 175 knots, 180 knots over the ground. So we're still in the green range. You can go into the yellow range. You can get up to about 200 knots before this really becomes problematic. Once you get into that yellow range, though, if you were to have to make some evasive maneuver and really pull on the controls, you could theoretically overload the airplane, snap a wing off, snap a tail off. And you don't want to do that. Even though you have the parachute up here, you don't want to experience that. So anyway, we're descending at a pretty good clip. We're coming down, we're at 1,800 feet, so we're going to level off at 1,600 feet here shortly. We're 5 miles out. I guess I missed the 10-mile call, so we'll go ahead and call common traffic. So Lebanon area traffic, this is Cirrus 328 Bravo Golf. We are 5 miles to the east. We're inbound for landing on 19. Any traffic in the area, please advise. So that just lets people know that we're here and that we're coming. I'm going to go ahead and pull the power back even further, maybe to 60%, because we need to get slowed down pretty good by the time we get to the airport. I might even pull it back to 50%. You have to pull it back further. I'm going to go ahead and give us a little bit of mixture. We'll level off at 1,600. Let's do our before landing checklist. All right, everybody's got their seatbelts on, harnesses set, so we're good there. Fuel pump, we'll go ahead and get that on. Mixture, we're going to go full rich. Flaps, we're good for now until we get into our downwind. And the autopilot, we've got it set the way we want it. All right. We'll go to the next checklist, although we won't really use it. We'll go back to our map. All right, we're 2 miles out. Still doing 150 knots, so I'm going to pull the power back even further, maybe to 40%. I really want to get us slowed down. This airplane is a very fast-flying airplane. It's hard to get it slowed down. And there's the airport. Let's see here, what are we doing? Try to find the runway here. So this airport, is this it? No, that is it. All right. Well, so we'll do a little change of plans here. Messed up my entry into downwind. So Lebanon area traffic, Cirrus 328 Bravo Golf. We're overflying the runway at 1,600. We could actually switch over and use runway 1, so we'll do that. So Lebanon area traffic, Cirrus 328 Bravo Golf, entering a left downwind for runway 1 in Lebanon. So let's go ahead and we're already abeam the numbers, so let's go ahead and pull the power back 20%. Try to save this. We're below 119, so we can go ahead and put a notch of flaps in. Counteract that bubble there, shooting for 100 knots, so get it trimmed down. 20%. A little bit more. All right. That works. Looks like we might be able to salvage this. So salvage this approach and landing. All right, we've got 45 degrees, so we'll go ahead and turn base. Lebanon area traffic, and at Lebanon area traffic, Cirrus 328 Bravo Golf, turning left base for 1, Lebanon. All right, so we want to shoot for 90 knots on this leg, full flaps, 20% power. This should give us about a 500 foot per minute descent as well. And we'll go ahead and turn final. Lebanon area traffic, Cirrus 328 Bravo Golf, turning final for 1, Lebanon. All right, now we want 85 knots on this phase. Overshot that just a little bit, but we're pretty good. All right, 85 knots. We'll use our power, use our pitch to control our airspeed. Use our power to arrest our descent. It's kind of a weird runway overlay here. Looks like there's a runway that's kind of offset. Something. All right, start to slow us down. We'll shoot for about, that's a taxiway. This airport needs some work in WED. All right. Bring our, oops, whoa. That was kind of a botched landing. Now bring our power back, flare us out. Wow, you would think I didn't fly Cirruses. That kind of landing. All right. Now we got to get us stopped here. We're coming up pretty fast on the end of the runway. Whoa. These brakes are pretty touchy. All right, we're good there. All right, we'll go ahead and get our flaps up. Hopefully we're at Lebanon. Yeah, the airport's on the airplane's on the airport that we were shooting for. We'll go ahead and taxi back here. It's interesting that FSEconomy wanted me to bring passengers here. There's no buildings, there's no nothing. So I guess we'll just pick them up off the field. All right, Lebanon area traffic, Cirrus 328 Bravo Golf. We are clear of 1 in Lebanon. All right, so we got our flaps up. We'll go ahead and pull the mixture back to the top of the X, get our fuel pump off. Try to taxi without weaving all over the place. Anybody see any passengers, or hey, where are you guys getting off? Who's picking you up? This is an interesting airport layout. I'm gonna have to double check this to see if this is really what it looks like in real life. I don't know if somebody has come in here and modified it and then uploaded it to the gateway, and that's why it looks weird, or if there's just some auto gen weirdness going on. We'll go down to the other end of the runway. Well, we'll stop here because I don't know what's down there. Wow. All right. Okay, so to end our FSEconomy flight, we'll bring the power back to idle. I want to make sure that the airplane will still run at idle. Again, I can't bring it all the way back because it gets weird. Check our mags. Just want to shut it off and back on. Make sure the mags are grounding properly. That they are. Go ahead and bring our mixture back to shut it off. Keys off. Hold them up. Anybody cares? Nobody does. And we can get our switches off. And put our parking brake on. If I can find my little controller here, should be able to reach down here. The parking brake on. Okay, that's it. And I'll close down my FSEconomy and get paid, and then load up and turn around and go back the other way. So thanks for watching, guys. Apologize again for the judder. Hopefully the next video will be better. But thanks for watching. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe to the channel. And as always, if you've got other things you'd like to see or learn, let me know, and I'd be happy to do some videos talking about those. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks.